pretty well, and had big time players on that. But then just sort of doesn't fit in with the music business so much. She kind of, and you'll still find her busking on the street. She busks in Venice Beach, and she busks all over Europe. And she was doing that for 10 years, and she reappeared partly in the Hudson Valley and then got reconnected to the music business and came
Do you know
out.
where she lives?
I don't really know. New York, I would think, but she travels around a lot. She lived in France as a teenager, although she was born here, and hence the French connection. She sings a couple of songs in French, usually on.
So he's sort of this, this local saint to me.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I hadn't planned on saying that.
Yeah,
but
Big Joe and the Disciples now. What are we talking about here?
Well, there you go. There you go. It is Big Joe and the Disciples. I never said that before. But, yeah, he's a saintly man.
Yes.
He really is.
I make fun of it, but I understand.
Yeah. And I don't, I'm not given to say those sorts of things. I don't really have a religion myself, and although I see the world in spiritual terms, organized religion has never been particularly interesting to me. That said, there are people who are saintly, and he's one of the few that he's a deeply, deeply good person.
So if you go past the trestle on Mountain Road, then you make a right onto Burr's Crossing Road, which is
that's actually a road.
Yeah, it's a dead-end road that goes all the way down to the creek and dead ends. And I suppose there was a bridge there at one point, like a little, called the crossing. There was a crossing of the creek there. So that
house is still around?
Yeah, it's still around.
People live in it?
It was sold. It was a rental when we were living there, and they rented by the room, so it was always a mixture of who's renting different rooms. There was 5 rooms, and we had a really good combination for a while there. And then the landlords decided to redo the house and sell it, which has since happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like this. First, Romo got divorced and moved in here, and he moved in with a couple other people. Then I got divorced, and I moved in here. And then Joe got divorced, and he moved in here.
House of broken homes, huh?
House of
broken marriages, yeah.
I moved to this place in 1996, the first month, January of 1996.
And how many people were living here then?
When I moved in, there were 3 living in the house. After I got in, there was only 2. I chased one out right away.
Yeah.
And then from there on,
you're a bad man.
Well, it wasn't my fault.
They just didn't understand you. Misunderstood.
I think that they didn't understand themselves, and they wanted to be away from people who did understand themselves.
I'm just kidding, Hawks.
Me too.
Okay.
So anyway, I guess I moved in January of '96.
Ooh, that must have been cold.
It was cold that year, and this place was quite different. It wasn't gentrified yet. It was an old, beat-up house, just the way I like it. And everybody was a musician. Joe decided to put a band together, and it took him 2 years, I guess, to put a full band together.
What was that called?
I forget what he called it. I think it was Big Joe Fitz and the Disciples of Soul, maybe.
It wasn't Blues Crossing.
Oh, it started off, you're right, as Blues Crossing, yeah.
Blues Crossing.
It was going to be Burr's Crossing, but he went to Blues Crossing. So that's true. It started with that, and Amy, who lived here, was the singer.
Uh-huh.
I didn't get involved in that project. I had my own original band at the time, going out and doing original music. Romo had his
The whole band lived here, or just part of it?
No, just Joe lived here, Romo lived here, I lived here. We all had bands, and we would have practice here on different nights.
Oh, great.
So it was kind of a crazy place. But,
I can imagine.
But we had, basically, we just had parties every 2 or 3 months where we would do some kind of theme. Like one time we had a clown party, so like the whole house was filled with 50 clowns and a whole clown band, and
good.
It was a crazy night, I want to say, along with a lot of other crazy nights. So there's a lot of music here, constant music, constant dinner together, family, definitely lived as a family here.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I do a lot of cooking. I'd like to cook, so I would cook, and then somebody else would cook, and then we'd just invite all our girlfriends and whatever over, and we'd have big parties, you know, 3 or 4 nights a week of eating and hanging out and listening to music and jamming, playing music and what have you.
How long did Joe stay then? Did he?
He stayed right to the bitter end.
Oh,
Yeah, he left when I left.
2001. Everybody left then.
Yep.
Oh.
Everybody at the same time. At first we were not, you know, he did his thing, I did my thing. He was a very quiet guy, and I'm not. And over time, by the time, I guess about 3 years into being there, we became good friends, still good friends to this day. And it was all about, you know, our spiritual contact in life. Although, you know, I'm not a Christian and I don't do any of that Christian stuff he does, but he does it from the point of view, from my point of view, of his point of view, is that, you know, he follows the Word and he follows the Spirit, and that's all you can ask from anybody. So we have good contact in that spiritual realm too, not just music and food. Although music and food is spiritual too, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
But
Community.
Community.
Yeah.
And so we still have community. Not as much as we did before, because slowly but surely, after 5 years of being out of that house, everybody's busy doing different things and having ideas of where they want to live and what they want to do.
There's a picture right up there of me and BB, I think, actually. That was one of my highlights when BB King played UPAC. Oh, this is, 20 years ago, but I emceed that show.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'd always listen to that record that he did live at the Regal, and I knew the introduction by heart. And now, the world's greatest entertainer, the king of the blues and all this. And it was in my mind, I was going to say that, but his manager goes, no, I don't want you to say that, you know.
Oh, darn.
But I think I said it anyway.
One early morning, as I was walking, I met a woman, started talking. I took her home to get a few nips, but all I had was a mint jewel.
But then someone told me, oh, you should listen to this guy, Big Joe Fitz, WDST. I mean, he's got a great show on. And so I'm saying, oh, okay, yeah, I'll check it out. So I checked out the show, and back then he would kind of infuse a couple of serious gospel numbers, and he played more of a
Yeah, he always has a little gospel set.
gospel set in there.
Right, I know.
And he played the kind of blues that I was used to listening to as a kid.
Yeah.
It was more gospel blues. A lot of your radio stations and your specialty blues shows, they played a lot of what I would consider to be Stevie Ray Vaughan rock blues. So I was really taken back by this guy Joe Fitz playing, gospel blues and playing the real rootsy blues. So I listened to it a while, and then someone said, well, you know him, John. You know Big Joe. I'm like, who is this? I really don't know him, Oh, yeah, he worked at Anderson School, works at Astor Home. So, they were telling me that I knew him because I knew some of his buddies. And I couldn't put a picture, in a face to this guy, Big Joe Fitz. And then finally somebody says, oh, his name is not Joe Fitz. His name is Joe Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, now that kind of makes sense. And I'm saying, but in the back of my mind, that doesn't add up. Because he sounds like this big, huge black guy from the South when he's on the radio. That can't be, So, of course, I didn't say that to people, but back in my mind, my head's spinning. So, at some point, I bumped into a few people from DST. They were interested in, in the store, and my wife decided that when we opened the store, we'd sell a little gospel.
I had always been interested in radio. As a kid, you know, you had your little transistor radio, and as I became a teenager, you found those stations down at the end of the dial that were playing the rhythm and blues and stuff.
So what were they when in New York?
WRL 1610.
The black station?
Yeah,
I thought it was a
WLIB.
gospel station, but maybe
Well, they would play gospel on Sunday.
Oh.
You know, they had everything.
WWRL, yeah, I used to listen.
Yeah. And I was the kind of person who would call in radio shows, you know, not talk shows, but call into the DJ and say, hey, you know, what's that record or whatever, you know, and enter contests. I just was tuned into radio in a way that, I don't know, maybe people aren't so much now, but. So when I moved up here, I was working a night job and had my days free. And I took a course at Ulster College, Ulster Community, in broadcasting, like Intro to Broadcasting 101. And they had a little in-house radio station there at Ulster. And
How old were you?
I was in my early 30s, I think. Yeah.
Were you one of the oldest kids?
Yeah. I felt like an old man then.
I bet.
Yeah, but that's okay. And then I wrote a letter to DST, actually, about something that was on the station, and the owner, Jerry Gilman, was very interested in, you know, like what people's response is, and he actually invited me in to talk about it. And then when I got there, you know, I told him I was interested in radio, and he said, well, we have internships here, and you're going to school, so one thing led to another. I became an intern there.
All right, Bart, here you go.
There you go.
Couple of comments. I think you'll have to edit them. Let's see. We'll start with my recollections of him starting this show. I'm going to say it was 1985, so I was about 13, 14. And I remember hearing about how he got this show on the radio, that he wrote a letter, apparently, to remember hearing that he wrote a letter to WDST, and as I remember, he impressed whoever got this letter so much that they contacted him, and then that's how the show started. Now, I don't know if that legend has grown, or it's just one of those Hollywood stories where if you criticize someone, stand up to someone and say, you know what, you've got a point there. Come on in and give it a shot. And that's kind of the way I remember that show starting. In the first few years of my life, before I realized, you know, that it didn't take the most talent to get on the radio, as I found with many of my coworkers. And being on the radio in the Hudson Valley, as great as it is for as long as he's done it, you know, it's still the Hudson Valley. But back when I was a teenager, I thought it was big time, and occasionally he would put me on maybe 3 or 4 times just throughout all the years. I don't remember what we've talked about, some weird things. I think a Mike Tyson fight one night. We talked about Mike Tyson at like 10:45 on a Sunday night. I'm sure that's really what a lot of the blues fans were hoping for, some boxing analysis from like a 16-year-old white kid. We've talked about some other things. I know he played a couple of years ago, he played a song around Hurricane Katrina time, and we listened in down here in Florida on the internet, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, and that was kind of a poignant moment. There was also some similarities with him into the blues this much, because for a while, I'm not as much into it anymore, but hip-hop and rap music for about 15 years, from about 12 or so to about maybe 27 or so, I was just hardcore into rap music, and I think very similar to the way he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the blues. I'm kind of that way with rap music, and I think there's some similarities there. It's interesting, different musical genres, different generations, and I think that's maybe a little bit more than a coincidence that we both have this little streak of soul running through us. Just tons of CDs at home.
I thought Big Joe Fitz was a black guy.
He's got a massive CD collection, and I would always complain to him. He would tell me that, you know, rap music all sounds the same, and I tell him, you know what, the blues all sounds the same. Every blues song is the same thing, from the way musically that it goes, the chords and the repetition, to the subject matter, and we would just have to agree to disagree on that. But he knows his blues.
He's got his radio voice going now, you know?
Take care.
He's on. Oh, that's it. All right. There he goes.
Agree to disagree. I was very, yeah.
Oh, that's good. He went light on me.
Yes.
Sam's memories. just in it was like a little mom and pop radio station. It was great. Jerry Gilman had a real vision of what he felt radio should be. He was another guy who had radio in his blood, and I guess grew up in Brooklyn listening to the radio. And so I began interning there, and then the fate intervened, and when I was just about done with my internship, the guy who was doing the blues show decided that he was going to leave. He was doing sound for the band, and he had to go out on the road with them a lot, and so therefore he missed the show a lot, and it was time to like just say, I can't do this show. And somebody said to me, hey, do you know anything about the blues? And it was like,
Funny you should mention.
yeah, like that. So started that in June of '85. I began my internship on New Year's Day in '85, and took over the blues show in June of '85.
Do you remember your first show? Were you nervous?
I have a tape of it. I'm scared to go listen to it though.
Oh.
I mean, I'll listen to it someday. We'll put it in the time capsule.
Yeah.
You know, everybody, you're a little critical of yourself, especially in the beginning. I'm sure I was a little stiff. And
were you a big Joe Fitz fan?
No. The first few shows, I was earnest Joe Fitzpatrick, if you please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very polite, too, to your listeners.
Yeah. But I relaxed into it, and I think, the rest is broadcast history.
We met in 1988 when I got a job with WDST as an overnight disc jockey on Saturday nights, and he worked there. I knew he'd worked there. I'd heard a show, but I didn't know anything about him. And I learned a lot about him when he, a few months after I started working there, we had a Christmas party at the Bear Cafe. And I was a new guy.